Jacob's children were put into captivity under Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. You have their fraternal twin, which is a nation now, back in the land, invading and starting to slowly invade the southern borders of their land. Continue, please.
Including the region around Hebron, an area that the Greeks later called Idumea.
The Greeks later called that, but we know that that's first where King David sat before he sat in Jerusalem, isn't it? Mm-hmm. David reigned for 7 years in Hebron, and he reigned for 33 years in Jerusalem. And you could go read that in the book of Samuel, brothers and sisters. So eventually the Edomites penetrated all the way to Mount Hebron in the southern part of Judea, which is about, I believe, 20 to 30 miles south of Jerusalem, modern day Jerusalem. Continue to read, please.
Judas Maccabees warred against them, and half a century later, John Hyrcanus completely subdued them, imposed the rite of circumcision, and invoked the old Jewish law of assembly.
Now, brothers and sisters, I'm trying my best to give you a quick rundown of what's going on, and that's why I said we need 3 or 4 hours to sit with you if you really want to know this whole conspiracy story. Brothers and sisters, Judas Maccabees, for anyone who knows about the Apocrypha, which is supposed to be among some of the lost books of the Bible, whatever they like to call it, the Apocrypha, you have writings called the 1st and the 2nd Maccabees, which actually explain to you what was going on in the land of Israel between the book of Malachi, which is the last book of the New Testament, and the book of Matthew, which is the first book, Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament, and Matthew is the first book of the New Testament. There is a 400-year period there that historians always be like, we wonder what happened. We know what happened. The Greeks came in there under Antiochus Epiphanes and other Greeks, and they did a lot of wicked things in the land of Israel. They started to make them sacrifice swine on the altars. They made the Jews stop keeping the Sabbath day, and a family called the Maccabees family, which means hammer, the hammer family, and that's how they came down on them Greeks, like hammers. They started with their father Judas Maccabees, who started the revolt. A century or so later, his son, one of his descendants, John Hyrcanus, who was keeping the revolution alive, they went into Edom territory in Hebron, south of Jerusalem, and they forced the Edomites by force to accept the Jewish doctrine or die. Is that correct, brother?
Yes, it is.
You read the book of the 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Anybody heard of Josephus, the great historian under the Roman Empire? We got the books called the Complete Works of Josephus. He tell you the whole story, just like the Apocrypha. They forced the Edomites because the Edomites were siding with the Greeks and helping Jews who were turning against the truth of God. They were all coming in cahoots, and as the Maccabees saw this, they led their soldiers into the southern part of the land of Judea, and they actually forced the Edomites to either accept the law and the statutes of the Old Testament and made them get circumcised, correct? Mm-hmm. And made them start keeping the Sabbath, correct?
That's correct.
So all of a sudden, you know what you got? You got Edomites, brothers and sisters, for the first time in history being forced into starting to keep what they call Judaism. But at the same time, people don't read the book of Esther, where the Feast of Purim come from. Go read that on your own time, what happened during the Persian Empire when people from 120 provinces from Ethiopia to India, when they all were proselytized and converted unto Judaism so that they could escape the day of Purim, which was the days of the Jews' revenge on the enemies that thought to kill them under the king Ahasuerus. But Queen Esther, who was a Jew, who they found out later, she saved her people by letting the king finally know she was a Jew and that one of his head men were trying to destroy her and her people. And he loved her so much, and he hated the plan that was going on behind his back, that he had the man killed. And brothers and sisters, this is all historical evidence. This is all historical fact, and we are not lying here. This can be read by any college student. This can be read in any library, on a university, a public library. Go online and Google it. Put in Esther, E-S-T-H-E-R, and find out what you read. Type in Apocrypha, type in Maccabees, type in John Hyrcanus, type in Edom, and you're going to see what you're going to find out. But don't just say that we on television lying in the name of God. Brothers and sisters, we are here to expose the conspiracy fact, okay? So now, we know that the Edomites were forced to accept Judaism so that they could no longer be a threat from the south on behalf of the Greeks to the Jewish who were revolting against the Greeks. Edom was now absorbed into what? The Jewish, or what we like to say Israelite, but we saying Jewish because that's what everybody like to know. That's what everybody calls it. The Jewish lifestyle, custom, and religion. Continue, please.
Julius Caesar in 47 BC appointed an Idumean, Antipater, procurator of Judea, Samaria.
Now, 50 years before Jesus was born, eventually these Edomites started to war and fight for the name of the Lord right alongside the Hebrew Israelites. Mm-hmm. These are Hebrew Edomites fighting alongside their Hebrew Israelite brothers. So the Edomites were considered Jews by the Romans and the Greeks eventually, just as if they was born Jew, but they were born Edom. Julius Caesar appointed Herod Antipater as governor over Judea, but Herod Antipater was an Edomite, right? Mm-hmm. He was an Edomite, given that position by the Roman. Continue, please.
Antipater, procurator of Judea and Samaria and Galilee. Herod, son of Antipater, was crowned king of the Jews in 37 BC.
Herod was crowned king 10 years later because his father died. And this is the Herod who was alive. This is the Herod who in the book of Matthew had gave the commandment to kill the baby Jesus that was born, right? Mm-hmm. This is that Herod. He was an Edomite, but he was called king of the Jews, put in that position by the Romans because the Romans seen that that it's these certain people among the Jews who are willing to work with us. And it was the Edomite converts who were forced into the Jewish way of life by John Hyrcanus of the Maccabees family, brothers and sisters. This is historical fact. But for the sake of time, continue to read that because it's a point I want to make there. Go ahead and continue to finish that out. I won't interrupt.
When Titus besieged Jerusalem in AD 70, the Idumeans joined the Jews in the rebellion against Rome. Josephus says that 20,000 Idumeans were admitted as mercenaries to the holy city. Once within, they proceeded to plunder and to kill.
Now, all the Edomites did not live in Jerusalem. And they seen that when the Romans were surrounding Jerusalem to destroy it in the days of Titus, the Idumeans or the Edomites seen their opportunity to finally get rid of the Jews once and for all. And Titus allowed 20,000 of them to go into the city. Now, they didn't let nobody in and out that city, did they? They had built a trench and a ditch around that city. Read history. For 3 years, they surrounded that city and starved them people out to the point that Jerusalem was called the city of the dead. They was throwing bodies off the top of the wall of the city, and all of this, it was carnage. But yet, 20,000 Idumeans get past the Romans. They were let in, and when they got in, on behalf of the Romans, they started to slaughter and kill. Continue to read, please.
When Rome conquered Jerusalem, Idumea or Edom ceased to exist.
So once the Romans conquered and finished and conquered the Jewish state, all of a sudden, Edom or Idumea ceased to exist? How do a whole nation that God told you in Genesis, he told their mother, these is two nations in you, Edom and Israel. Israel gets taken into captivity by the Romans, read your history, and all of a sudden a brother who helped the Romans conquer them disappeared? How do a whole nation disappear? They took on another identity. Let us go over to Psalm 83, please. King David in his day warned Israel what was going on, and anyone else who would hear of what he had from the days of King David, even all the way up until Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70 under Titus. This was something that the Jews always had to deal with, or Israel. I keep saying Jews, but we're talking about Israel. But Jews is the name that they just use to cover the whole nation now. So, Psalm 83. Could you start reading that verse 1, please? And this psalm is written by the psalmist Asaph. Go ahead.
Keep not thy silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God, for lo, thy enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people,